Hi, good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us for our transportation and logistics panel here this morning. We'd like to thank you for joining us this morning, especially being that it's morning here on the last day of conference. Really appreciate you all joining us here today. We do have really a fantastic panel lined up for you all. I'm going to let them sort of introduce themselves as we go along here and as they give their presentations. But we are joined by Jessica Blase from Innovative Sales, Ron Brown from the Port of Oakland, and Debbie McMillan from Derco Foods. All of them bring a very unique perspective to this discussion that we're going to be having here today and presentations that they're going to be giving today. And hopefully be able to sort of run through every step of the process in getting the almond from the farm all the way to its end destination. So with no further ado, I'd like to bring up Jessica Blase from Innovative Sales. Jessica is a member of our Technical and Regulatory Affairs Committee and brings wonderful expertise to that committee in this logistics space, and we're very glad to have her here today. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Also, if you have any questions, I'm sure at this point we've got the QR code here to scan. This will pop up a couple more times throughout the presentation. And so just scan it, and we'll answer your questions at the end of the presentations. Thank you. Jessica.
All right. Okay. There we go. All right. Good morning and welcome to today's Transportation Logistics session, Getting from Handler to Market. My name is Jessica and I'm with Innovative Sales International Division. We're a trader broker based out of Modesto, focusing mostly on almond, walnut, pecan, and cranberries. We work with almond and walnut handlers throughout California, a pecan facility in New Mexico, and a cranberry facility in Wisconsin. Over the past 12 years, I've managed most of the daily operations for the company and have gained experience in exporting to about 35 countries. In 2020, I got involved with the Almond Board by becoming an industry volunteer on the Technology and Regulatory Affairs Committee. And this year, I joined the Global Communications Committee as well. And my choice to get involved just really stems from my desire to learn, contribute, and hopefully improve the industry. Being on each committee has opened my eyes and in some cases changed my perspective on industry topics. So I highly recommend anybody getting involved if it's something that interests you. And then one last thing about me, I'm from Modesto, so you'll hear me say almonds, you'll hear me say almonds, I can't help it. So I don't know what comes first to your mind, but there are many different definitions of logistics. Webster Dictionary highlights the aspects of military science. Shopify gives a definition on their website that sounds like a modern post-pandemic tribute. Oxford Dictionaries is a simple, direct link to transportation, and Cambridge Dictionary gives a definition that's a little more thought-provoking. Cambridge's definition of logistics resonates the most with me: the careful organization of a complicated activity so that it happens in a successful and effective way. My day-to-day role bridges the gap between sales and service. I'm managing transportation, documentation, accounting, customer service, vendor relations, risk management, all of these things with impeccable attention to detail. When Brock asked me to speak today, I was given the blanket topic of timeline for how almonds ship. So I designed my presentation trying to keep that in mind and at the same time keep it interesting, hopefully, for a wide range of industry members. Much of what I'm talking about applies to domestic shipments, but my focus today is on exports, providing you with a high-level overview of how almonds move globally and elements that influence the timeline. So as cliche as it sounds, the timeline begins in the orchard and the grower's daily, year-after-year commitment to their orchard. Strong orchard sanitation and keeping orchard floors clean reduces pest pressure and debris that potentially lead to less intensive fumigation, lower aflatoxin risk, faster export lab clearance, and overall cleaner product moving downstream. Mother Nature isn't always an ally, but monitoring moisture and crop maturity has a downstream impact as well that helps prevent mold, rancidity, and aflatoxin growth, all which can contribute to reducing the risk of product rejections or QC-related delays and issues. Protecting kernel integrity during harvest and transport is essential as well. Physical damage leads to broken kernels, more dust, and higher insect and moisture susceptibility later in the supply chain. Overall, these practices are just a few examples that strengthen quality, support a smoother export process, and do not go unnoticed. I also want to acknowledge the Almond Board's efforts through funding, research, and tools like the Almond Learning Hub that continue to evolve and benefit the industry. So keeping focus on how, let's move to the days to weeks almonds spend at the Holler Sheller. During peak harvest, throughput is constrained by a variety of elements that show us logistics is much more than transportation. Every step from weighing, sampling, storage, drying, to cleaning, processing, and labor requires precise coordination. Early quality control is critical. Tasks like checking moisture, foreign material, and insect presence and pressure, paired with grower practices I mentioned in the previous slide, can potentially remove days from the production schedule and keep product moving. Year after year at this conference, we see the latest, greatest major upgrades in pre-cleaning and foreign material detection. Equipment and technologies that capture data and monitor throughput will continue to play a major role in our industry. And a common thread you'll see throughout my presentation today is the demand for real-time quality data. So when Holler Shellers are looking to update their facility, the return on investment should lead to fewer reworks, better yields, and faster handoffs across the supply chain. The same applies to handlers. I'd like to highlight the complexities handlers face managing in-shell and kernel products across different varieties, grades, sizes, and destinations to execute committed sales. Just like growers during harvest and Holler Shellers post-harvest, handlers work around the clock to meet global demand. Operations span cleaning, sizing, sorting, USDA requirements, lab testing, fumigation, and phytosanitary steps. It's a non-stop cycle of meeting food safety standards, government regulations, and customer expectations. Packaging and labeling add another layer of complexity, managing multiple material types, sizes, and inventories while producing fast, accurate printing for foreign text, images, and barcodes. Documentation must be both standard and customized to match each customer's needs and destination requirements. Overall, it's a highly coordinated system built to ensure compliance, quality, and on-time delivery. Today, we're focusing on how almonds ship, and overcoming throughput constraints to speed up turnaround for inbound loads is crucial in today's volatile market environment. Handlers are improving in key areas such as expanded warehouses and cold storage. Traceability tools contribute to better visibility, facility and compliance management. Advancements in equipment increase accuracy, reduces manual effort and labor challenges. Digitalization of documentation, which I'll expand on later, streamlines processes and removes paper bottlenecks. Behind the scenes, the Almond Board staff are guiding the industry through critical regulatory and quality requirements ranging from fumigation and MRL standards to aflatoxin protocols like EPAC in Europe, and this year's in the making success of the Japan protocol. Staff helps keep the industry current on labeling requirements as well, and let's not forget tariffs. Beyond these highlights, there's a wide range of additional support and innovations that continue to come forward to keep industry operations efficient, compliant, and future ready. So up to this point, much of this almond journey has been centered around production, and I hope what I've shared has given you a high-level overview of elements that impact how almonds ship. Let's now shift focus to the export process. Exporters are experts in the process, and why Cambridge Dictionary's definition of logistics resonates with me. Exporting almonds is a complex, highly coordinated process that requires managing trade regulations, customs procedures, logistics and international shipping, foreign market standards, documentation, and payment and finance risks. In our industry, the exporter can be either the almond handler or a US-based trader. The choice between the two depends on capabilities and risk tolerance. Many handlers choose to sell to a US trader when they want to reduce exposure to overseas payment risks, complex compliance requirements pertaining to international shipping and documentation, or volatile logistics costs. An exporter should be well-versed in risk management. From my perspective as a trader, risk management comes down to 3 core principles: know your handler, know your customer, and know your destination. Knowing your handler means understanding how reliable they are in meeting quality specs, documentation accuracy, and shipment timing. Errors at origin, whether in grading, packing, fumigation, or paperwork, become your risk once product moves. Knowing your customer is equally important. This includes creditworthiness, payment history, buying patterns, and their ability to navigate customs and regulatory requirements in their own country. Tools like credit insurance and clear payment terms can protect you when those risks increase. Knowing your destination means understanding the market's unique regulations, labeling rules, import controls, logistics challenges, and even geopolitical risks. Some destinations come with higher chances of delays, cargo holds, demurrage, or non-payment, so aligning Incoterms, insurance, and documentation becomes essential. Smart use of insurance, Incoterms, liability title clarity, and payment structure significantly reduce exposure and create a safer, more predictable, and more profitable export operation. For the sake of time and not wanting to bore you guys, I won't dive too deep into Incoterms, but in short, they define the transfer of liability, where the ocean bill of lading or seaway bill is the document that controls the transfer of title. Payment terms are separate as well. I have seen in many scenarios over the years when elements of these 3 have not been fully understood and resulted in unintended risk exposure points. When you combine these elements, reliable handler, vetted customer, and a well-understood destination, you dramatically reduce exposure and set the foundation for safe, consistent, and profitable exporting. So, the container, the steel box that changed the world. Shipping has been a backbone of the global economy for centuries. Its roots go all the way back to 3rd century BC, but the modern industry truly took shape in 1956 when an American truck driver invented the first shipping container. By the late 1960s, consistent container sizes and global standards of equipment handling were widely adopted, setting the stage for decades of rapid expansion of efficient intermodal transportation. When I entered the almond industry in 2013, the landscape looked very different from today. There were multiple carriers offering multiple weekly services. Soon after, we were in the middle of major consolidations that led to several carriers going under and the formation of new carrier alliances to keep those who survived from going further in the red. When the pandemic hit, it exposed how U.S. ag exports were dependent on a steady flow of imports. We saw a massive global imbalance where empty containers were located, unreliable vessel schedules, port congestion, and carriers implementing clauses that had always been in service contracts, but often overlooked. Events like the Suez Canal blockage and carrier customer service cutbacks intensified the strain. My perspective during all this was, for the first time, the almond industry wasn't just moving goods and competing against other nuts and commodities for shelf space and ingredient inclusion. Shipping became its own beast. Not only were we competing against each other for containers, but we were competing against anything and everything that could fit, or in the case of empties returning to Asia, nothing that fit inside a 40-foot container. Volatility, for multiple reasons, pushed many carriers to order new equipment and new ships to expand capacity. And even as we moved out of the pandemic, new disruptions, like the Red Sea situation, and new alliances continue to reshape the industry. Looking at the present and future of container shipping, the industry remains absolutely central to global trade, carrying over 80% of world trade by volume. We're seeing the rise of mega vessels that are about the length of 4 football fields bring major infrastructure and routing challenges. Tariffs, trade policies, and global geopolitics continue to reshape supply chains, while new technologies such as real-time tracking, smart containers, and fully digital documentation are finally starting to deliver end-to-end transparency. Blockchain-based systems are helping drive this shift, improving traceability, data integrity, and the handoff between parties across the supply chain. Carriers themselves are expanding beyond traditional transports, offering more visibility tools and value-added services, positioning themselves as integrated logistics providers rather than just vessel operators. At the same time, there's increasing pressure on carriers to decarbonize with alternative fuels, energy-efficient routing, and slow steaming strategies, all shaping transit times. These longer, less predictable transit times have financial implications as well, particularly cash flow impacts, with inventory sitting in containers longer and tying up working capital. Manufacturing shifts are beginning to alter long-established trade lanes. Meanwhile, global peace and political stability continue to influence routing and other carrier decisions. In the U.S., port labor contracts, union negotiations, and routing strategies remain major variables. West and East Coast ports are competing and investing heavily in expansion to accommodate mega vessels, while automation is gradually transforming terminals worldwide. Regulatory modernization is accelerating across global trade. Many international trade frameworks are rooted in English law, and in 2023, the UK passed the Electronic Trade Documents Act, which gave electronic documents, like bills of lading, the same legal standing as their paper counterparts. Before this change, UK law required physical possession of paper documents to prove legal title or rights, which made paper mandatory for many shipping, financing, and owner transfer processes. The new law removed that barrier and allows businesses to use electronic documentation where they choose, opening the door for truly paperless trade. Since then, there's been growing global momentum. Electronic bills of lading and seaway bills are becoming more widely accepted, and I will expect we'll continue to see major changes in how documentation, ownership, and liability are managed across the industry. I'm especially curious how bank direct collections will evolve and how future Incoterms may adapt to these new systems. Incoterms, remember, define the point in the supply chain where liability risk transfers from seller to buyer. Well, they're issued every 10 years by the International Chamber of Commerce. So we're currently operating under Incoterms 2020, which were published before the pandemic-related logistics disruptions. Earlier in my career, we worked under Incoterms 2010, and the differences were relatively minor. So it'll be interesting to see whether pandemic lessons and new regulations drive more significant changes in Incoterms 2030 that sellers and buyers will need to understand. Overall, the shipping sector is becoming larger, more digital, more environmentally accountable, and far more complex, shaping not only how goods move, but how global trade itself will operate in the years to come. So, as I wrap up my presentation, when it comes to almonds exports, we're incredibly fortunate to have the Port of Oakland right in our backyard. Its proximity to the Central Valley means shorter trucking distances, lower inland costs, and faster container turnarounds, reducing the risk of missing vessel cutoffs, allowing shippers to react quickly when needed. The reliability of West Coast services is absolutely critical. In recent years, we've seen lost or reduced services out of Oakland, which forces cargo to move through alternative ports. The lost service to the Med has had the greatest impact on my company. Most cargo to Spain and Morocco, for example, now get loaded rail in Oakland and goes to Houston, Texas, where it's loaded on a vessel there. While most of the time these land bridge services still run smoothly, lost vessel services out of Oakland do increase the risk of delays and exposure to unexpected charges. Even more critical than reliable services, perhaps, out of Oakland, is bringing terminal operators to the table and holding them accountable for container receiving windows and trucking appointment availability. I'd be happy to discuss this further in the Q&A, but this crop year, we've really seen a full circle and chain reaction from weather, moisture, leading to slower processing, QC delays, and terminal constraints that push shipments past their contracted windows. For Almonds, where market volatility, timing, and buyer expectations are everything, maintaining strong relationships and communication is essential to keeping supply chains efficient, cost-effective, and competitive. And with that, thank you guys, and I'll hand it over to Brock in the port.
Thanks, Jessica. Before I invite Ron up to the podium here, I want to just take a second and tell you how critical Ron has been to Almonds and really to the Port of Oakland as a whole in really keeping the industry informed as to what's going on at the port as of today, like he's going to do here in a moment, but also Jessica had mentioned back during that pandemic time frame. And every single morning, I would get an email from Ron Brown that said exactly what was happening at the port, and that was critical. And you know, I work for the Almond Board, so I'm not a shipper or anything, but I know that getting that information reliably from him was huge in keeping product moving during that time frame. So without further ado, Ron, I'd like to invite you up here to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Port of Oakland currently. Thanks.
Thank you, Brock, and good morning, everyone. Boy, I just had a couple of great commercials, coming from Jessica and from Brock. I was like, maybe my boss should be in the room. Maybe I'll get a pay raise out of this or something. I am Ron Brown. I am a marketing and commodity representative for your port in Oakland. And the reason I say that is because most people, particularly citizens here in California, don't realize that all the ports, and there are 12 of them in California. Maybe later we'll have an exam and have you name all of them. All the ports in California actually belong to you as residents of the state. It's called a public trust doctrine, and it commands us to operate these ports for the benefit of you as residents of the state of California. So the reality, we are the stewards of the port. To make sure that we're making the movement of international cargo in and out easier for you to do business with your customers all throughout the world. So it really isn't our port, it's your port. We essentially work for you, and when you're not happy, you really, really have the responsibility to let us know that, so that we are doing things, again, to make your trade, your business, your customers happy and to maintain the flow of cargo. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is tell you a little bit about your port and what we're doing currently to make sure that we are ready for whatever challenges may come going forward in the future. And many of you know there are quite a few of them. So making sure that the configuration is on the screen. This is a facility layout of your port in Oakland. Currently, it's about 1,300 acres. It has 3 large international container terminals and 1 domestic terminal. And the objective of these terminals, as you would imagine, is to make sure that the movement of cargo from ship to shore and from shore to ship is flowing easily and conveniently. Now, I will tell you, over the last 20 plus years that I've been at the port, there have been a number of disruptions, many, and I don't want to lay any blame, but many of them are out of our control, but yet we still try to make sure to give you accurate and timely information for you to make good decisions so that it doesn't negatively impact your business. So as I mentioned, there are 3 international terminals, the largest of which is the we call it locally the SSA terminal. It's about 300 acres. It's actually the largest marine terminal on the West Coast. Now, I know the ports of LA and Long Beach are much bigger ports, but in terms of an individual terminal, this is the largest terminal on the U.S. West Coast. The domestic terminal is operated by Matson Lines. They are a Jones Act carrier or a U.S. flagship ocean carrier, and they're able to move cargo from one U.S. origin to another U.S. destination. The international carriers cannot do that, okay? So Matson Lines operates a terminal in Oakland, and their cargo primarily moves from U.S. mainland to Hawaii and to U.S. territories, primarily in the Pacific, being that's where we're located at the Pacific. We also manage a significant amount of backland property. A lot of that is warehousing and distribution facilities. We have about 1 million, actually a little over 1 million square feet of warehousing right in the port area. A lot of this is to do cross-dock, transload operations for your cargo and other types of cargo. And we also have significant refrigerated warehousing in the port area. Now, earlier this year, we had the opportunity of hosting a number of the Almond Board executives and the Almond Board, Julie helped me, I don't know, the training program that you guys have for executives, leadership program to visit the port. And they had the opportunity of visiting some of these warehouses and meeting a number of the other stakeholders at the port. So most importantly, I want you to know that the stakeholders that help us operate that port are very, very familiar with your cargo. You know, we know that almonds are the largest export cargo by value actually on the West Coast, not just on the Port of Oakland. So if you look at it by value, it is the largest export commodity, even larger than the beef and pork and poultry that most people think out past you. Almonds have the largest export value. And Oakland has the largest percentage of those almond exports, and we certainly do appreciate that business. You'll also see in this facility map in that blue area, and I can't point, I don't have a pointer here, but there is some large properties, as I mentioned, that are warehouses. We also have the 2 large rail ramps in Oakland, being the Burlington Northern Santa Fe rail ramp and the Union Pacific rail ramp. And that helps us move cargo that's coming in from the Midwest, that comes in rail cars, transferred to containers right in the port area, and then off to other parts of the world. The reverse is true also. Cargo comes in by ship, is put on rail, and then is shipped to various parts of the U.S., even as far east as Atlanta. We see a lot of cargo that's going, as an example, Nike cargo that goes into Memphis, but there's cargo that actually goes through our port, even as far east as Atlanta. So all in all, in terms of a port facility, and a number of people call us a public infrastructure agency, our primary role is to build out the infrastructure and then lease it out to stakeholders, terminal operating companies, drayage and trucking companies. We have, as a port authority, we have about 8,000 truck moves every day. In comparison, and again, I don't tend to hype my competitors in the South, but when you look at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, they do about 35,000 truck moves every day. So there's a lot of activity of truck moves in and out all of our ports. On the next slide, really is just sort of a diagram of what our volume has been over the last 20 years. And I only use the 20 years simply because that's just the time frame that I've been there. Oakland's volume has been pretty flat. And some people will look at that graph and say, wow, that's not good, you're not growing. Well, the reality, we've seen a lot of things happening over the last 20 years, and Jessica mentioned just a few of them. I think I'm a little older than her, so I can share a few more with you. You know, we went through sort of my friend Julie Adams is here, and I've learned a lot from her. We went through a couple of labor disruptions. I don't know if you guys remember that. There are a couple guys in the room that use the same barber as I do, so they probably remember this. A lot of labor disruptions we went through, and some of you may not remember, they called it Occupy Oakland at once upon a time when we went through the financial downturn. So we've kind of endured a lot of changes over the years, and of course COVID had a significant impact. So fortunately for us, we haven't seen those those peaks and valleys that the ports to the south saw. They saw tremendous growth and they saw tremendous drop-off. Our volumes have actually been fairly flat and consistent, primarily because Oakland is a little bit different than LA and Long Beach. We have about a 50-50 blend of import cargo to export cargo, whereas the ports in Southern California, being the first inbound ports of call on the Pacific, typically see about 70% imports and about 30% exports. And that creates a little bit of equipment imbalance for them, so that they are actually, in some cases, relocating some containers and chassis and things like that to other parts of the country and even up here to Northern California. We have a pretty good balance, so we typically don't have equipment issues. That don't mean that they don't periodically occur, but we typically have a fairly good selection of containers and chassis and are able to balance out our cargo pretty well. We are planning for growth, though. In the next few slides, I hope to share some of the things that we are doing. But I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what types of cargo is actually going through the Port of Oakland in addition to your cargo. So we do see quite a bit of import cargo, albeit, as I mentioned, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach typically handles most of the inbound import cargo. But things like furniture and equipment, mostly equipment, more equipment on a percentage basis comes in through our port than comes in through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. They typically will handle a lot of your consumer items, consumer electronics, apparel, footwear, furniture, of course. So a lot of that goes through the ports of LA and Long Beach. And about 40% of the cargo that they see, they actually are putting on rail as intermodal cargo, and it's going to other parts of the U.S. And they do get some rail cargo in that goes out export. But as I mentioned, their volumes in exports are about 30%, and they don't see as much of the agriculture exports that we see. Now, we do have some advantages, and of course, I exploit those advantages to as much as possible, which is agriculture. And I've kind of focused on agriculture over many years. So as you can see on the import side, and again, this is just the last 20 years, and those graphs have changed a bit, but you do see some commonality. The furniture and some of the autos and wine and things like that are pretty consistent. Now, on the export side, I kind of like this picture better. We see, dry fruits and nuts, and your cargo, almonds, are a big portion of that category of nuts. We kind of group them all together because it's HS codes, but has grown significantly over the last 20 years. And I would categorize not only almonds, but also walnuts and pistachios. As a last port of call, which Oakland is, we also see a lot of recycled material that's going back to Asia-Pacific countries to make boxes and couches and cars and all types of things that they can actually ship back to us. So we do see a large percentage of recycled material. Here is shown as paper scrap, but it also can include things like scrap metal, plastics, even glass. We're beginning to see scrap glass being exported to other parts of the world. Cotton has dropped off pretty significantly, and those of you that are close to cotton growing regions, you've probably have noticed over the years, they've plowed over a lot of their cotton, and we don't see as much cotton exported from California that we once had. Wine has done fairly well, although they say this new generation, what generation are we with now? The Z or X or Y? I never know. But they're not drinking as much wine. They are eating almonds. That's a good thing. They are eating almonds because it's a high protein source. But they're not drinking as much wine. So the volumes of wine that are exported and actually that are being consumed domestically has dropped pretty significantly. Now, in terms of what are we doing to prepare for the future, a couple of things, a lot of things actually. And most of them certainly have a tag of infrastructure improvements. So one of our largest infrastructure projects that we have going forward is our turning basin. For those of you that may have had a chance of visiting our website, we have a beautiful video on there showing how the San Francisco bar pilots actually turn vessels at the port before their berth at one of the terminals. But that process is getting to be more challenging because the vessels are getting much bigger and they're getting much longer. So we're in the process of improving our turning basin or widening our turning basin in Oakland. And that process is not an easy one, as you would imagine, being that we all live in a very aggressive environmental state. There's a lot of environmental requirements that have to be matched before that can be done. It takes a lot of money in terms of working with federal agencies. So we're in the process of going from about 1,500 feet in terms of the actual radius, well, we want to call it that, of our turning basin to about 1,700 feet. Which would allow those 24,000 TEU vessels that Jessica mentioned to be able to be turned in our basin. And we know that we need to do that because short of that, the ocean carriers will start looking at other locations. So we need to have that infrastructure in place to make sure that those vessels are continuing to come to Oakland, not only to bring the import cargo, but most importantly, to take back California and U.S. exports to various parts of the world. So that's a very, very big project for us. So we're doing projects on our inner harbor and on our outer harbor. The inner harbor has been the one that's been most in media because we're going to have to cut away portions of the city of Alameda, or at least their marina area, and we're going to have to cut away portions of Oakland. In other words, about 6 acres on both sides, on the Alameda side of the estuary and on the Oakland side of the estuary, to do excavation and then to dredge that down to 50 feet so that, again, those longer, larger vessels can turn. And we're also doing the same thing on the outer harbor, which isn't so much a challenge in terms of excavation, but we'll still have to dredge that down to the 50 feet to be able to turn those vessels. So that's a big portion of what we see going forward in the future. We have a number of other infrastructure projects that we're working on, one of which we hope to increase, believe it or not, our import cargo, and that is to install on-dock rail in Oakland. Historically, we have not had that. Oakland is actually the oldest container port on the U.S. West Coast, so we sort of did things the way we thought they needed to be done back in the 1960s. LA and Long Beach came in after that, so they were able to do some shortcuts based on what we did. And I have that reoccurring dream, I apologize. But we need to sort of get caught up with doing on-dock rail, because what that means is it lowers the cost for imports. You don't have to dray the cargo across the street to the rail terminals, which adds some cost, adds some time. So if we have on-dock rail, again, that will increase the number of importers utilizing our port and actually make even more equipment available to you as exporters. So that's one of the primary things that we're looking to do. We have some great separation projects that we're working on to make sure that, you know, when the trains are leaving, they don't stop the trucks. Currently, you know, when there are periods when the trains are loaded and they're headed out, portions of the port is shut down while that train is leaving out, so trucks are backed up, but not too significantly, but there is a bit of backup. So we are doing a great separation project so that the trains and trucks can move simultaneously without interfering with each other. Many of you have heard about the Howard Terminal. It's become infamous. I think they're making a movie about it in terms of how the Oakland A's tried to take it over and build a baseball park. Well, that's not going to happen, but we are going to put that terminal into operation. It may not be a marine terminal, but it may be a facility in which some final assembly can be done for manufacturers before the cargo is actually exported. So that is what we have planned for that, a final assembly facility for manufacturers that want to utilize space near the port so that they can load out heavy. So those are some of the terminal, some of the investments that we're making. Our terminals are also making investments. We've got 2 new cranes, gantry cranes. These are the ship-to-shore cranes that are coming in this year. There are 2 that are actually being processed now that have already arrived, but they still have to go through a processing. It actually takes about 2 months, even after the crane arrives at the port, to get it operational to work efficiently in California. And then we have 2 more very, very tall cranes that are going to be arriving next year. So there is some expansion of gantry cranes in Oakland. Also looking ahead, and I think I'm running close to my time, so I don't want to burn up too much because my friend Debbie down here has some wonderful things she wants to tell you, and I certainly don't want to interfere with that. So looking ahead, we are doing everything that we can do to comply with state regulations. Many of you are probably aware California had imposed some very, very strict regulations on ports, all of its ports. Does anybody kind of have a name of all the ports now, the 12 ports in California? Anybody want to raise their hand and fill them out? Maybe not. Well, we are going to have a quiz, so we will have that later. So a hand, wow, were you yawning or something? But no, the California Air Resources Board imposed some very strict regulations on the ports, essentially saying that we must go to 0 emissions by 2035. Now imagine this, you got 8,000 truck moves in Oakland, you got 35,000 truck moves in Southern California, and you're going to have 0 emissions. Now imagine what challenge that is, to convert all of your equipment to electric or hydrogen fuel cell type technology. So we were well on our way to doing that. A lot of our stakeholders were doing that also. And then, of course, we had sort of a regime change. And that, as a policy, I don't think it's died away, but it has certainly slowed down quite a bit. But nonetheless, we were well on the way to installing a lot of battery recharging facilities, either near Oakland or on the port property, to be able to help meet those mandates, to make sure that your drayage companies were in compliance. So a lot of our activities were involved with what we call the greening of our port, to make sure that we were complying with that. I mentioned the elevated rail capabilities, a great separation, and we're also expanding cold chain. One of the other things that the Almond Board executives got a chance to do, and I don't know if Julie did this, but they went into the deep freeze. At one of our facilities, they have a freezer that can do what's called snap freezing. In other words, can freeze items within 15 minutes, completely freeze. It's solid. But it's a state-of-the-art refrigerated warehouse system, temperature control. In other words, they can vary the compartments of this facility to meet what's necessary for that cargo. So Oakland has established probably the most state-of-the-art facility in the U.S. right now to be able to do the temperature control zones throughout a facility to meet whatever the requirements are. I mean, it doesn't necessarily affect your cargo, but a lot of the proteins, the beef, pork, and poultry, some of that needs to go out as fresh. So there's a certain temperature it has to be set at in order to be able to be sold abroad as fresh, because they get a much higher price for fresh items than they do for refrigerated items. So I'll leave that alone. The other thing that we've done is improve data sharing. And I was mentioning to someone earlier, we have now gone to a mobile app that we're promoting, and you can all access it through our website, where your drayage companies can go on to their app. You know, they don't have to be in the office. They can do it on their mobile phone. They can get direct visibility into the terminals. So there are cameras that show the gates at each of the terminals. We're also posting the turn times, which is the actual time that it takes for the truck, once it arrives at the pedestal, entering the terminal, to when it leaves the terminal. We've worked with the terminal operators to establish a goal of 90 minutes for dual transactions. In other words, where most truckers, you know, they try to maximize their efficiency, and maybe they'll bring in an empty, and then they'll take back a load, or they'll do the reverse. So they're doing 2 transactions while they're at the port. So what we've asked our terminals to do is to meet that 90-minute goal for those dual transactions. The other thing that we've done is work with the drayage companies, the terminal operators, and all of our stakeholders to come up with an appointment system. Now, I know that's been a sore point for a lot of shippers. But what we have kind of arrived at, with the help of many of you, or representatives from your commodity group and from importers and other export commodities, is that they wanted to see a common appointment system at our port, so that their drayage companies can make an appointment at one terminal for a drop-off of an empty container and also be able to pick up a load at another terminal. In other words, so that each terminal didn't have their separate appointment system. They wanted a common appointment system that would be across all the terminals. So we've been working to do that with the hope that it makes it even more efficient and more cost-effective for you working with your truckers. I decided to do something, and I don't mean to burn up too much more of time. I decided to, since we're all engaged in this age of AI, I decided to ask ChatGPT a question. Okay, the question that I posed to them was, or it, I don't know, what do we call it? Is it him, her, or some innocuous type, entity? Why the Port of Oakland is the best port for almond exporters? Okay, that was my question. Here's the answer. Proximity to California's almond growing region. We're the closest port to the largest growing regions for almonds. Great answer. Okay. The other answer was strong export orientation infrastructure. True, we have been installing a lot of infrastructure to make sure that we serve the agricultural community effectively, being that we are the closest port to the largest agriculture growing region in the United States. We want to make sure that we have the right infrastructure to meet those needs. Efficient supply chain and lower congestion. Well, yes, no, and maybe. I think we're doing a good job in terms of congestion. We're not seeing the congestion that we saw during the pandemic or slightly after the pandemic. So we learned a lot of lessons from that, and we have been applying infrastructure projects to make sure that we don't go back to that ever again. Robust global connectivity. Yes, being that we are a last port of call for cargo leaving the U.S. going to Asia-Pacific countries, that it is a gateway that allows the movement of cargo to all of your customers along the Pacific. Specialized partnerships with the almond industry, and I've certainly enjoyed my relationship with the almond board. Julie and I, well, I'll put it this way, I've learned more from Julie than she learned from me, I'll put it that way. So I've learned a lot about your industry from the almond board executives and members and friends that I've developed over the years. Rail and road advantages, and I mentioned the rail connectivity and how that helps. I don't know that almonds use a lot of that. I know one of my friends here in Sacramento tried to do the almond train for a while, and some of you may remember that. But that was during a period of very high congestion for all the ports on the West Coast. And it isn't quite necessary right now, but we do know it existed. As a matter of fact, we sort of helped it into its existence. But I don't think it's that involved right now. But most importantly, guys, thank you for the business that you do through your port in Oakland, because it is your port, it's not our port. And most importantly, again, happy holidays. Did I burn up too much time?
No, you're good.
Sorry, Debbie.
Not at all.
Thank you, Ron. So we've heard now from Jessica on hopefully how things should flow through the system, and Ron on a little bit about what the Port of Oakland's doing to help that system work smoothly. Our final speaker today is Debbie McMillan from Derco Foods. Debbie is an absolute tremendous source of knowledge and experience. I think she's seen it all when it comes to shipping and logistics. And unfortunately, things don't always go to the plan that we have laid out for shipping and logistics. So Debbie's going to speak a little bit about what can go wrong and how to maybe some best practices in there as well as to how to deal with some of the things when they do go wrong. So with that, thank you very much. I would like to welcome Debbie McMillan to the podium.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure how to follow these two. Jessica, that was an amazing primer. Needs to be shown to every ocean carrier to remind them that we're their customer and what we go through by the time we finally pick up an empty container and fill it with almonds or other tree nuts to get them out of the Port of Oakland. Ron is one of the most knowledgeable and kindest gentlemen that I've met in my time in this industry, and he's just an excellent source of information, but he's also a huge supporter of our industry. So I'm so glad that you got a chance to hear him today. Listening to them, I threw out 80 to 85% of my notes because it all got covered. So you're going to hear me rambling today, but 80 to 85% of the California almonds do go out of the Port of Oakland. And so that's an important figure. LA, Long Beach are great for the people who maybe are Bakersfield South. So almost everything comes out of or heads out of Oakland. So back to my notes. I'm Debbie McMillan. I'm with Derco Foods. I've been there almost 28 years. I have seen a lot. When I initially started, I was going to be in sales and trading. And then on September 27th, 2002, the PMA, the Pacific Maritime Association, decided that they would lock the ILWU, union workers, out of the Port of Oakland because nobody was playing nice on a container contract renewal. And at the time, we were a much smaller company. We had 9 containers in the Port of Oakland that were going to our customers in Europe for Christmas. And if they didn't go, we were finished. It was like that. So we set up an entire trauma unit, and ever since that day, I got stuck with shipping and logistics. I am looking for a replacement, so if anybody is interested. So it's been a long and eventful journey every day, every week. I think I'm not going to see something new. I'm not going to learn anything new. Every day, I learn something. I think that the growth, especially of almonds, when I first started, one of the first meetings I went to at the almond board was to talk about a reserve because we had 500 million pound crop. And what happened when we got to 1 billion? We were going to have to donate to a third world country or buy an old vessel and fill it up and sink it in the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, there were all sorts of things that they were talking about. And now, you know, we have these enormous crops that are so desired. We're so lucky that there are so many destinations around the world that consider our product, our almonds, as such a nutritional and functional food. So we should all be thankful for that and then be really disgusted by all the things that we have to deal with to actually put them in a container and get them out. I truly am just going to, Brock asked me to do this and I didn't want to do it, and then he said I could have credits against my anger management program that I'm in because of the ocean carriers. And so I think he could only have 1 credit. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'd like to go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves and then tell me why you're here, because I am so glad that you are all here, because I know you all want to go home or be someplace else. But if I'd seen this panel on the program, I probably would have come also just to see if I could learn some magic trick or something to make things a little bit better. I'm here just to BITCH about things. I think, it'd be interesting to know, just by a show of hands really quick, do you make your own bookings directly with ocean carriers? Does everybody else work with a freight forwarder or through an NVO? A non-vessel operating? Nobody makes bookings. Okay, this is good. When you go to make a booking with an ocean carrier, you select the vessel that you want to go on, you tell them how many containers you want to ship, they send you back a confirmation number. It's essentially making a reservation at a hotel, but they change your dates all the time, so don't pack your bags until you know the dates. It's amazing that this industry exists as far as ocean export, not just for almonds. There are probably, in 2023, they said there were about the equivalent of 35 million 40-foot containers being used globally. 35 million. The almond industry this past November shipped just over 3,900 of those. So it's amazing that all of this works. There are about 6,000 container ships globally. very few of them call California. And that doesn't include the feeder vessels or the barges from the transshipment ports that you need to get from one location to another. So that we travel from point A to point B on a rather regular basis is pretty incredible to me. I think vessel schedules, back in the day, K-line cut at 4 o'clock on Thursdays, MSC was every Wednesday at noon. You could like clockwork. Now, there's no predictability. There are 5 ocean container shipping companies on one vessel. They're all sharing that space. So if you want to go to Hamburg from Oakland on an all-water shipment, you try one of those 5 companies, but it's one vessel. So if that vessel skips a week, you're pretty much dead in the water. You don't have a way to get there. And I think that's something that the shipping lines need to be reminded that we're customers, and they need to have a little bit better understanding. But I also know that they want to go where the money is. And so it's one of those things where you don't like the person who asks you to the prom, but you have to dance with them because everybody else has their own date. I think it's important if you hire your trucking or you manage your own transportation of getting an empty container or a full container to the port. I think it's important that you know how many free days the shipping line is offering from origin on your empty container so that you don't get a detention bill as a surprise a few weeks later. I think it's important that you ask your trucking company, are they taking screenshots of the terminal schedule every day or a couple of times a day, so that if there is a detention bill that comes your way, you're able to call them and say, why did we get charged 3 days? We know that this vessel was delayed, but what was the earliest return date delayed to? What was the LRD delayed to? And you can provide that information to the carriers and say, this was not my problem. This was something that you caused, so you can't charge me the detention. Need to do that. Excuse me. I am not a speaker. You guys didn't drink any water while you were up here. What was tough? I think the shipping lines, you need to know your representative from the shipping line. Most of them are impotent. They can't do anything about anything for you, but at least they can listen, and they can maybe give you a name higher up or put something through for you. But you need to have somebody that you can talk to. When you have a problem, their automated response is a claim number now. It's, okay, anger management. Yeah. We used to have reps. Here's the old lady talking. So that we used to have reps that you could call and they would actually do something or be able to help you or find solutions. And I think we have reps now where I'm like wondering, why did you choose this career and why did you accept this job? Because you have to talk to 300 of me every day about the same problem. And I'm grateful that they're there, but there's a lot to be fixed in the ocean shipping line. Brock told me I had to be really nice to the port, but he didn't say anything about the carrier. So I hope nobody is here from the, if you are, it's okay. We'll talk later. I think, yeah, trucking partners are key. Knowing your shipping line representative, knowing what your options are, and knowing how to track your containers. All of the shipping lines have great websites. You can track your containers. I wish there was like an automated system where they would send us updates when they make changes. It seems with ChatGPT, AI, all of these things that they could just say, who are the beneficial cargo owners? Who are the booking holders on my vessel? This just changed. Let's send out a blanket statement. And yet they don't. And so it's very frustrating to me because they're offering you, you know, all this new technology at a cost, but they can't transmit information that they have available in their system to the people who are on those vessels. We have, I have 47 containers right now that we're going to go from Oakland to Haiphong on a 20-day transit, direct direct, not getting off anywhere, just Oakland to Haiphong, with the #1 carrier in the world. They are in Qingdao, Yantian, Ningbo, Busan, and Singapore. And they are sitting. And it's because they decided that they needed to drop them off because there was some congestion in Vietnam, and so they wanted to drop them due to weather delays, and then they could pick up their exports from Asia, make a little bit more money, and keep the vessel going westbound. These things make me angry, and nobody's reacting. So does nobody else have these problems? Do I just have really bad luck? I don't know, but it's frustrating. And then I go to them and I said, but this was a direct vessel. Yeah, it's still a direct service, Debbie. It's just that we had to stop for a couple of vessels. So even though I know my rep, even though I know the president of that carrier, I've had dinner with him, it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to change. My cargo is sitting there. I'm hoping I can still make the Chinese New Year, the Lunar New Year holiday, but we'll see. What other things did I want to cover that you didn't already cover so perfectly?
Expand on it. There's honestly, things I took out of mine.
Okay,
Yeah, so
good. We're going to have question and answers. If you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss about it. I did all of this without cussing, and I want you to be very proud of me, Brock, because that was one thing that we also discussed. But thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being in shipping logistics and helping us move this amazing crop. We're just so lucky to be in this business and not be selling furniture or widgets or something that's in such a bad economic session that we're fortunate to be here. And I know that I don't have a right to complain about a lot of things because it all ends up working out. But we are the provider to our suppliers on a just-in-time basis. And when you're unable to do that because of something out of your control, it's really tough to deal with on a mental basis. So I'm looking forward to finding a replacement for myself and leaving the industry in a couple of years if I can. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, thank you for letting me just ramble on and get my credits for my session. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Debbie. So we're going to answer some questions here in just a moment. But while Lindsay comes to set up at the podium here, I'm just going to go down the line and ask a couple of questions. Jessica, it sounded like you also needed some anger management credits for something.
Yes, I'm glad my husband's in here today listening, and it's not just me.
I'm just curious, what is it then what's your biggest headache right now within the system? What's going on with what you're shipping that's really, sort of causing you some issues?
I think right now, kind of at the end of my presentation, with just moisture this year and weather, that the rains that we got in September and October, it was just enough to kind of make the product a little wetter coming in, and it's taking longer to get through the hauler shellers and through the handlers. And it's like loads for me, once we got everything cleared this week, there were loads that should have shipped in November, but get them clear, and the terminal doesn't have appointments to return loaded containers. So now we have to push the cargo onto the next week's vessel. And like what Debbie said too, we used to have, when I first started, like if you missed a Tuesday port cut, you would have an option later that week because the carriers were operating their own smaller vessels. So even though like carriers had space on multiple different vessels, right? So you would have options. Now you only have one option. All the carriers are on one mega vessel. So if you miss that Tuesday port cut now, your next available vessel isn't till next Tuesday. Maybe it's next Friday. Like we're seeing just these wide gaps in vessels. And so that kind of, adds to the headache. So like I said, kind of coming full circle with that, it's like you're doing all these things to try to get the product up to that point, and then at the very end, it's not going to happen. Eventually it'll happen, but it's a challenge.
Thank you. And then Ron, there's one thing I've wanted to ask you. You know, I don't know how we can have a discussion about anything that has to do with any sort of international trade without talking about the impacts of tariffs. So just from your perspective, you know, can you talk maybe a little bit about any types of volume changes you've seen over the last year that seem to result from some of those tariffs and tariff threats and people wanting to get product in or out by a specific time?
Well, as you would imagine, it's been, let's see, can I say this publicly? The roller coaster from hell. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if I said that out loud. You know, just to see how the natural or historical shipments, you know, we had peak seasons for, you know, back to school cargo and holiday cargo and certain different events, and agriculture has its own peak seasons when cargo is going out. To see those peak seasons get sort of meshed together, which creates a little bit of challenge to try to schedule for the terminals. You know, again, as I was mentioning earlier, I mean, we're the Port Authority. I mean, our primary role is to really be a good landlord more than anything else. So, you know, to make sure that, you know, the windows are there and the doors are there and the gates are there, however. But the scheduling has been just a nightmare for the terminal operators. You know, vessels would get out of schedule. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of what's called blank sailings, where you get a notification, as Debbie was mentioning, from your ocean carrier saying, oh, we're not coming to Oakland this week. Okay, well, what do I do with my cargo? And a lot of that gets sort of, as I mentioned, meshed together. And, you know, most people look at us as the Port Authority, although I tried to do a successful job of letting you know it's your port. You know, they'll call and say, essentially, fix it. And it's difficult to do because a lot of times you can't. And I'm reaching out to the terminals to get information. I'm reaching out to the ocean carriers to get information and then try to come up with something that's palatable to be able to go back to the person that has the problem and say, you know, these are your options and this is just information for you to make a decision. So I'm giving you a long answer to a short question. I apologize, but it's just the not knowing has been the real challenge. And then tomorrow the issue changes. You know, well, we're not going to do a tariff. Okay, I just put 20 plans in place yesterday in order to fix a problem, and you're saying it's a different problem today. So that's been the real challenge for us and for all the ports. To see the volume spike so much and be essentially out of control, and then having to tell people it's going to be some delays. You know, and the last thing I want to tell somebody is that, you know, it's not my fault. I can't do anything. You know, I'd rather just sit and commiserate with you for a few minutes and at least try to make you feel good about it. But to give you good information is really my primary objective. Give you good information that you can make good decisions from. So sorry for such a long answer to your short question, but that's been the challenge that we've had all year long.
No, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to ask a couple of questions. Sounds like we had a rather inquisitive bunch out there today, and so we do have a bunch of questions to get through here. So
yeah, this has been quite a lively and substantive debate. I think my stomach is still hurting from all that laughter earlier, but I just want to mention this session has a 5-star rating, so I am very impressed. So kind of on that topic of international trade and tariffs, I know one of the big issues earlier this year that probably will come back to the forefront is on the U.S. Trade Representative's Section 301 China shipbuilding investigation. I know that the fees and restrictions were put on hold for about a year, so I think we have a little bit of, room there, but just wondering, you know, what do you think are going to be the impacts, if any, to the almond industry? What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I don't have an accurate singular answer for you. Let me say that. It's going to be interesting to see us build ships again in the U.S. Actually, I'm hoping that does happen. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult, but I really would like to see there be a U.S. ocean carrier or a couple of U.S. ocean carriers that can stand us up for better consistency. So maybe that's a wish, prayer. But the reality has been, when it was first announced, and it was announced at TPM in Long Beach, early, I think in February, and the president of the ocean carrier that announced it singled out Oakland. And essentially, he said, if this regulation is put into place, there will be some ports like Oakland that we'll just simply bypass. We'll go to one port, drop off all of our cargo, pick up cargo there, and then go back. Because the fees were, at the time, proposed to be so high that they weren't willing to go multiple U.S. ports, because the fee would apply for each U.S. port call. In essence, the initial plan was $1.5 million, I think, per U.S. port of call. And again, this is the president of one of the largest carriers saying, if that happens, we will bypass a lot of U.S. ports. Pick up all the cargo at one port, drop it off at one port, and then go back. So we were sort of in shell shock when that happens, like, well, what does that mean for us? Fortunately, it did not happen. It's been sort of deferred to a year or a year and a half, I think it is. But I hope, and again, this is a real high, heavy lift, that at some point we do start building vessels and we do restore a U.S. carrier or a couple of U.S. carriers to make the world market more competitive. That's my personal wish. That's not a wish from the Port of Oakland, but I do hope at some point that we are able to push back, be competitive, and align the rest of the world that, our export cargo is very valuable, and it's certainly in high demand all throughout the world, and it certainly needs to be treated much better.
Thanks. I actually do have just one other thing to add to that, just from the specifically almond perspective. When that came out, immediately, again, we recognized that there was a threat to the Oakland port just from that initial regulation that was proposed. And actually, the Almond Alliance submitted comments on, I think, every single round of proposals that have come out in an attempt to get USTR to recognize exactly what you were talking about, the critical role that Oakland plays in the almond ecosystem and moving and getting that regulation changed and eventually suspended here. So I just wanted to make that one note there, that is something that the almond industry was paying particularly close attention to.
Wonderful. So the next question is a two-part question related. It was smart containers were brought up, and just out of curiosity, wanting to know, what do they do for the shipper container? Does it ensure container tracking, temperature control, costs, and are they readily available? And kind of related to that, do you see any new technology or innovations that are coming down the line in shipping and ocean freight?
Is that for me, or I'll take
Be for you or anybody?
Again, I can't say that I have a singular answer to that, because, the technology is evolving so much. The smart container concept, and I'm trying to remember I don't know if it was MSC or one of the others that sort of initiated that. To be able to track your container throughout the world, I think is a great idea. You can do that when you take a flight somewhere in the world. You can kind of track where the flight is and, scheduling and things like that. So I think that's certainly a great idea. I think it still has some room to improve, and hopefully it'll be adopted by all the ocean carriers, particularly those that are handling refrigerated freight, to be able to know that your cargo is being maintained at the temperature range that you need it to be. Again, I think that's all great ideas. It is an expensive endeavor because, to move containers around the world is not a cheap thing to do. And I think it still has a lot to grow to be able to do it uniformly all throughout the world. So the answer is it's not quite there yet. It's a great concept, and it's going to need more investment and more involvement from other ocean carriers.
So, go ahead.
All right, just before, Debbie, could you talk maybe a little bit about, we've got, and this is just sort of on the technological side in general, you've got, the carrier saying one thing through their technology systems. You've got maybe the terminal saying another, and none of these systems really talk, not just across different carriers and different terminals. They don't talk to each other even when they're owned and operated by the same general entity at times. Could you talk maybe a little bit about just where there might be improvements that could be made in that sort of a system so that you as the shipper know or have at least a better idea on what the carrier is doing while it's out there?
Boy, there are a lot of layers to that I'd like to answer. I think I'll start just at the very base level. The terminals and the carriers don't communicate here domestically well. So the last receiving date, the earliest return date that a carrier gives you doesn't always match what the terminal gives you. Over the years, they've always said, have the truckers check the terminal, follow the terminal. You follow the terminal, and then you get a bill for something, and they say, well, you should have followed our last receiving, our earliest return, not the terminals. And so that communication is very poor. It doesn't happen often in Oakland. It happens quite a bit in LA Long Beach because the terminals are all wanting to get the cargo in as quickly as possible, but the carriers don't have a free time agreement with the terminals, and so they get charged once your container is dropped on dock. As far as smart containers, I've heard different things. CMA was offering to do something. I've not seen any good data or research on it being functional or helpful. A lot of people have joked that maybe they'll just throw Apple tags in their containers and see how far they can track them. I know for refrigerated shipment, we don't do that often, but when a client requests, we always put our own data logger in the container and then a return envelope so that when it gets to destination, our client opens the container, returns it to us so that we have our own data. So if there is a condensation claim or an insurance claim or something, then we have our own data in case it becomes difficult to get data from the carrier. So I don't know if that answers. But
Perfect. I think we've got time just for one more question, Lindsay. Thank you.
So we've got a lot of years of experience and expertise on this panel. So just curious from all of your perspectives and thoughts, how would you design the process in the system for this?
Yikes.
Go ahead.
Jeez. I mean, so working with so many different people from like different handlers throughout the state and then different ocean carriers and all the trucking involved, like, I think just maintaining relationships. And that's at the end of the day, like you hear all like AI and it's going to take over and things like you need people and relationships and communication to make this process happen. And I think at the end of the day, like there's so many people out there that like want to understand the different steps and want to have the same like end goal. And I don't know. I think we're a pretty cool industry to be involved in, and I'm actually like curious just what everybody does out here, and like I hope that what we've said kind of touches you guys and like makes you think about different aspects of the supply chain as well, so we can have these conversations to lead to improvement.
I'm very cynical. It's not the relationship between the handlers or the truckers or the exporters. I think that we all have that dialed in. You know, we're able to manage those relationships, just like you said. For me, it's the ocean carriers. And I think that we're their customer, but there's not a level of customer service coming from them as a whole. Maybe on a personnel level there is, but not on a fulfillment of the booking promises that you have. And so for me, that's really disappointing. And I know that they're in it for profit. I want them to stay healthy, but it's just so difficult because the back of a shipping BL, if you've ever taken time to look at it, the font is this big and it covers them from everything except maybe the hand of God reaching down from heaven and picking up your container, but they're covered for everything else. So anything can go wrong and they don't really have any liability to it, but they don't have any, they don't fulfill the promise of the booking. And that's just a basic tenet that just makes me sad and upset. And if you're not going to fulfill the booking, then let us know that you're not. And I think it's a communication situation with the carriers. I don't like them, can you tell?
Well, I'm going to offer a couple things that we'll call them myths or wishful thinking. Because, over the years, we've seen a number of things occur, and we've tried to come up with solutions. But personally, I like to see exporters work in partnership with some importers. Because the way the carriers act, to be honest with you, they want that inbound cargo because the rate is almost 5, maybe 10-fold. So for what you're paying for exports going to its destination, the import cargo is paying about 5 to 8 times that. So those carriers are really, really focusing their attention on import cargo. So as an industry association or as large shippers or large and small shippers, to partner with a couple of the importers, like a Nike or Walmart or whoever, it doesn't necessarily have to be at that level, because they get a little bit different attention than our exporters do. And I like to see our importers and exporters work together and maybe come out with some sort of, he's going to pay for it coming this way and I'm going to pay for it going back, but we are a team, or collectively as an industry association or as a grouping of importers and exporters. As we went through COVID, you could see how different shippers were treated differently, and it was just ugly to see. To the extent that some were getting cargo removed from a vessel that, let's see, it's the statute of limitation. I can't go to jail for this, can I? Sorry to say that out loud. There were some things that were going on, and some of it needed to be. There was some medical equipment and things like that that absolutely needed to get priority, so those things did happen. But others just simply by sheer dollars were able to buy their cargo movement, where the smaller shippers were just pushed aside. So, in the short version of it, to see some import and export combinations to help move cargo, particularly in certain lanes. I think that would be very instrumental to get your cargo moved more efficiently, because, they don't want to, they may look at you a little bit differently, but your trading partner on the import side says, no, you treat them just like you treat me. And they get their movement, they get a call back, they get a response or a phone call from Debbie, just like I do. So I think that would work. It's not an easy thing to do. It's easy to say, of course, but I think some of that would cause carriers to operate a little bit differently.
Wonderful, thank you.
That's really interesting.
And I'd like to thank you all for joining us here on the morning session for transportation logistics. And if we could give our panelists one more round of applause. Thank you all. Wonderful job.